Hey everyone, so another video. This is pretty cool to get to do them back to back. It's the same shirt as the last video. If you just saw, I posted an interview with David Minconi, the author of a wonderful new book out about Rounder Records. From that, I went to someone else that I had been wanting to talk to for a while, and it finally worked out. Um, this person is related to Rounder Records, so it's a nice segue and appropriate to post these together. But we talked about much more than that. We initially had the idea to start talking due to the topic of Tony Rice. We talk about that. We talk about his great band Blue Highway, the Blue Highway Festival, and lots more, including banjos. So there's something in this video for everyone. I'm really happy to present this talk with Jason Burleson. I think we will have certainly some more in the future. So let me know if you would like to see more with him. And if you have any questions for Jason, he's a wonderful guy to chat with, great musician. I have loved Blue Highway for years, one of my favorite bands, and I sure hope to make it to their festival one of these years, and hopefully you will too. So let's turn to that interview. Thanks, as always, for watching.
There we go. Okay, well, thank you for doing this. Thanks for your time. I'm really eager to talk with you. It's I've had the desire to for a while, just finding the time, but now we both have a moment. So I'm really grateful for you to have this call.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So let's start a couple topics, but let's start with the coolest one, the freshest one is you guys have a new single out. Tell me about that and tell me more about the full album, like if you have a release date for the whole project and just some background on that.
Well, the new single is called The North Side, and Sean, our mandolin player, Sean Lane, and his brother,
Mm.
and a guy named Gerald Ellenberg wrote that.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get together to record, we usually just get together one evening and everybody throws out songs,
Mm.
everybody passes around the guitar,
Mm.
and we end up with way more than we need because we got so many good writers in the band.
Sure.
So, yeah, so Sean threw that one out, and we worked it up and cut it, and we actually did this whole record probably, I'm thinking, about a year ago at least. It was last
Oh,
fall,
okay.
and we got
Mm-hmm.
together and recorded the whole thing. And of course, now it's it don't really make much sense to put out a whole CD,
Right.
um, because
Yeah.
of the way the industry is now. Used
Yeah.
to, it was a pretty big income for bands, especially at
Yeah.
festivals and shows. You sold CDs. Now
Mm.
they don't even have CD players in cars, so
Yeah.
it's went to a mostly streaming world.
Yeah.
And mainly the main income for a bluegrass band is having your stuff played on Sirius XM,
Right.
the bluegrass channel, because they're really the only ones you make money from if they spin your track
Yeah.
a lot. So what we've been doing is just picking singles from the stuff we recorded back then, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
we'll mix it and master it and send it out. So I think we've released. I think this might be the fourth single from that batch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and we just recently started listening to mixes and finalizing mixes for the whole project, which I'm
Yeah.
not sure when that will be out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, of course, it's going to be on the Rounder People's new label called Down the Road, and that's
Right.
Ken Marion,
Yeah.
and we're pretty excited about it. It's got a bunch of good songs on it. I've got an instrumental song I wrote on there.
Oh, great. Great.
I kind
Did
of wrote it. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. I just wondered, did Ken have because I just talked with the author of the new book about Rounder, David, yesterday, and he said that at IBMA Ken was running around recruiting bands and doing some A&R work out there. Did he have any involvement with this record? Did he offer any production tips or suggestions on it?
Well, not really. We've
Mhm.
been on the Rounder label since about the about the year 2000. I
Right,
think our
right.
first record was Still Climbing Mountains.
Yeah.
That came out actually on 9/11,
Mm.
believe it or not. That was the
Mm.
release date of that record.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've been on there for 20 some years, so he kind of trusts us. He don't really
Sure,
offer much.
sure.
He kind
Yeah.
of knows what we do and how we
Mhm.
do things, so he don't really he don't really offer too much direction. But we've just
Right.
loved working with those guys over the years. They're just,
Yeah.
I've always thought they put out the best quality looking packages of any
Yeah.
record label, and just it's always just top notch. They
Yeah.
never have cut corners. So
Right.
we just enjoy being with them for that long.
Did you notice any difference, I mean, just as your role as a band, did you notice any difference between, working with them, like, on your first couple records, and then there were, those, like, what, the last 2 or 3, I think, were under the new management. Did you feel any difference, between those 2, once it went to Concord?
Not really. Kim was still our main contact guy.
Oh, okay. Gotcha,
So
gotcha. Okay.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, Rounder and Sugar Hill were both sold to Universal at some point.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
I guess Concord bought Rounder from Universal, or
Mm,
however it
yeah,
went. But
yeah.
Kim was still our main guy. So
Gotcha,
even though
gotcha.
they didn't own it, they were still very involved in the whole process of anything that came out on that label. So it was kind of
Oh,
like
okay.
things never
Yeah.
really changed, even though they
Yeah.
they sold it, but it was still like just like from day one, pretty much with them.
Right, right, right. Well, it's just the irony is so much when they've spent, and it's now 53 years since they founded the first one, and now they have no role in that, and they started their own, and that just shows the kind of quirkiness of the music business. You never know what will happen
Absolutely,
with it. So,
absolutely.
yeah, about your banjo piece, that's actually a nice segue because I had also wanted to ask you about your banjos, and I have played your Prucha model. I absolutely love it, and I was curious how that relation started. Who approached who first on that, and if you had been looking at them for a while. I just wondered how that got started because it's just such a great instrument. All of theirs are, and your model especially.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. Um, Blue Highway we were playing up in upstate New York, and I left home, and I usually flew out of Charlotte, North Carolina at the time,
Mhm.
which was about a 2.5 hour drive. So I
Mhm.
got to the airport and figured out I forgot my banjo. And of course it's too late to go back and get it. So this guy named Brandon Green was
Mhm.
playing in Daryl Webb's band, and they were
Mhm.
playing at the same place up there, and he had a Pruka,
Mm.
which I didn't even know he had what he had. But I called Daryl and I was like, "You think I could borrow your banjo purse banjo up there?"
Yeah.
And it was Brandon, and
Yeah.
he had a Pruka up there, so I ended up borrowing his Pruka for that festival up there, and just fell in love with it.
Sure. Sure.
And Brandon was like, "Well, let me hook you up with him," and he sent me his contact info, and I just emailed Mr. Pruka, and it's like, "I
Yeah.
love this banjo,"
Yeah.
and he immediately just wanted to do a Jason Burleson signature model.
Great.
So
Great.
all of that came out of forgetting my banjo at home.
And that what was that like? I f- I think I first recall seeing them like around 2018 or something. When was that approximately that you first started with him?
I think I got my first one in 2015,
Mhm.
2016, somewhere in there, and
Mhm.
it was a top tension uh,
Yeah.
with the tone ring.
Right,
And
right.
it was very, very heavy. And I
Yeah,
remember just telling him how much I loved it, but
right.
it was so heavy, it's breaking my back. It's so heavy. So he said, let me see what I can come up with.
Sure.
So he came up with this lightweight model, which is the banjo with just the hoop in it, like the old Gibson 100s.
Right.
Um, so it takes away the weight of the tone ring,
Yeah.
and even though it's a top tension, the top tension hoop is made out of pot metal, so it's also not
Mm.
as heavy.
Yeah.
And I'm not
Yeah.
sure of the exact weight difference, but it feels like it's half as heavy as the regular banjo.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that what you're using on the CD or and in the studio?
Yeah, I played that lightweight model that I got. I think I got it maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I've played it exclusively ever since I've got it
Hmm.
in the studio on stage. It's just my favorite.
Yeah.
I can't think of having a better banjo than that one.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a surprise to me because when I heard one of those in person, and I just couldn't believe that it was, a lightweight model. But, because of like some of those Gibsons, there's a substantial tone difference. But this one, I mean,
Mhm.
a blindfold listen, I wouldn't have had any idea. I mean, it just had such a depth and tone and such a volume and punch that I wouldn't have guessed it was anything different, in that regard. It just has such a great tone.
Yeah, people are really surprised. They come up and ask me about it, and when I tell them it doesn't have a tone ring, their mouth flies open. I can't believe
Yeah.
that banjo does not have a tone ring, but yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think it sounded better than the one I initially got that has the tone ring in it.
Yeah, yeah. Do you still
So
have that one?
actually, I just sold that one.
Okay.
I had I brought it to Blue Highway Fest so Prucha
Yeah.
could display it, and
Okay, sure.
yeah, so he came up and said, "This guy wants to buy this banjo. What do you think?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's."
Yeah. On that topic, the reviews I've been seeing come in on Facebook were just like way over the top this year in positivity for the Blue Highway Fest. So congratulations on that. That
Thank
couldn't make it this year, but it is certainly on my radar for next year because I'm too jealous of all these great reviews to not be there. Was
you. Yeah,
what?
we've had really good feedback. We've been
Yeah,
lucky enough to get whenever the way it started was some guys in Big Stone Gap up there approached us about doing a festival and wanted to use us as the host band.
yeah.
And they were like, give us a list of who all you want to play. And we just started naming names, and they got everybody we wanted. So and they've done that for 2 years in a row. So we just started naming
That's
our
yeah.
bucket list of who we'd like to have at our festival, and they came through and got them. So
Wow,
but
that's
we've
incredible.
also had really good feedback from bands. How
Good.
well it ran,
Yeah.
and Charlie Cushman told somebody about the first year when the Earls were there. He told somebody, I heard it secondhand, but he's like, "This is the best rum festival I've ever played at." And that's saying something for Charlie
Yeah,
Cushman to say that because
sure. Yeah.
he's had quite a few under his belt over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I first had this idea for this call on some discussions in the Tony Rice forum. So of course, we'll get to that. I was curious what if you can recall the first time you ever heard Tony, maybe it was an album or a live show. Do you remember when the very first time you ever heard his music was?
I remember it very distinctly. Um,
Okay.
I started playing in when I was 11 years old, which would have been 1979.
Hmm.
And my dad had a bunch of really old, just worn out Flat and Scruggs records. They just skipped and hopped and popped.
Yep, yep.
So, and I loved that stuff. And when I was a
Sure.
kid, I started playing the banjo, and I could learn the tunes and I could play them, and it seemed fairly easy for me,
Yeah.
and I liked it okay.
Hmm.
I liked it okay.
Yeah.
But the first new record I got that was brand new was the Bluegrass album, Volume One.
Oh,
You
sure,
know,
sure.
and you put the needle down on there, and Crow just pops that kick off on Blue Ridge
Right.
Cabin Home and opening pinch,
Yep.
and
Yep.
that was the first new record that sounded really good, and it just completely blew my mind.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember um, when it comes to Tony's guitar break on Blue Ridge Cabin Home.
Sure.
And I remember the first time that went by, thinking
Yeah.
it had to be the mandolin. It had to be a mandolin
Yeah.
because I had no concept that a guitar could do that.
Sure.
And it got
Sure.
to the end of it, and I was like, was that a G run? Because I recognized a G run.
Right.
But before that, I was like, this can't, it can't be.
Yeah.
Because the only thing I'd ever seen up to that point was some drunk guy in a field
Yeah.
at a bluegrass festival missing a G run. That
Right.
was the
Right.
extent of what I thought a guitar could do in bluegrass. So it completely blew my mind.
Yeah.
And I just went in search of anybody that could even start to do a little bit of that because I had no concept on how you could do that on a guitar.
Yeah.
And I
Sure.
remember I saw Richard Bennett at a fiddlers convention.
Hmm.
He was one of the first guys around to play that stuff, and he had a Santa Cruz Tony Rice guitar. And him and this guy named Carl Caldwell were jamming, and they could play some of that stuff, and
Yeah.
it just completely blew my mind, and then Crow's banjo playing on that record. That's that record, and then I got the first Dual Loss and a Quicksilver record, and I got Boone Creek's One Way Track record. And
Okay.
those three records, that's what made me want to play when I was a kid. You know,
Sure.
that
Sure.
that's what
Sure.
lit the fire under me to want to learn how to play.
Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of I discovered the stuff in the reverse order. I found the Bluegrass Album Band first, and then realized that all these tunes were classics from Bill Monroe or Flatt and Strud's, and then I discovered them. But it was certainly hearing their versions first that caught my attention.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and
And I've been
Richard.
lucky enough to. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was saying, and Richard is still. I mean, he's just one of the best out there, vocally, instrumentally. He's as good as you can get.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but you were
Yeah.
about to say.
Well, I was about to say that I've been lucky enough to fill in for Terry Balcom, who's been
Oh
having some health
wow, yeah,
problems. Cindy contacted me back in the summer, wanted to know if I could play out the rest of his dates. They
mm,
had about 15, I think, left. So, and
mm,
luckily, my schedule worked out to where I could do all of them.
yeah,
But everybody, asked me what made me want to play, and those three records I just said.
yeah,
And Terry plays banjo on two of them. So I was
yeah.
like, he played banjo on two of the three records that made me want to play when I was a kid. It was
So
an honor.
how long was it from when you heard that first that iconic opening of Blue Ridge Cabin Home? How long from that point to when you finally got to see Crow and Rice in person?
Well, that's another interesting story. My uncle lived in Granite Falls, North Carolina, which was probably
Okay.
about 2.5, 3 hours from there to Denton.
Mm.
So me and a buddy of mine jumped in his Ford Ranger with a camper top on the back of it.
Okay.
We jumped in the back, and it had to be 110 degrees in July, all the way from Granite Falls to to Denton, North Carolina, to that festival.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we parked up. Anybody that's familiar with that festival, there's kind of a top part, and then the stage, and then there's the bottom part below it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we parked up top, crawled out of that truck, just sweat pouring off of us, And I remember walking down to where the stage area is at, and Hot Rice were on stage, and they were working on a building, and I
Okay.
remember just getting cold chills,
Yeah,
and
sure.
it's 120 degrees outside, and Tim's standing up there singing and playing at the same time, and just getting cold chills.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
for sure.
that was, I think that was 1982, and that was the first year that the Bluegrass Album Band played Denton,
Mm,
which was also the first year that Tony came back east, and started
mm,
singing again.
yeah.
And it was so crazy to just see people's reaction to Tony. And just like he walked out to check his mic, and he would just hit two notes, and the crowd would just scream for like 5 minutes. He couldn't even check his mic. It was like it couldn't have been
Oh,
any.
wow.
I mean, if it had been Elvis or the Beatles, it couldn't have been any more excitement to see somebody. It's crazy.
That's amazing. Oh, that is really amazing.
And I remember
Wow.
Steve Dealing, the banjo
Mm,
player Steve Dealing,
yeah.
he went to the airport to pick up Tony
Oh,
or
wow.
to and take him to the show.
Yeah.
And he said Tony had some mixes of Cold on the Shoulder that he played for him on a cassette
Oh,
on the way
geez.
home. But he also said that when they got there and they were, I guess people recognized Tony in the car, and they were trying to get to the stage, and he's like, people were just almost mobbing the car to where we couldn't even keep driving. And he said it kind of freaked Tony out a little bit, almost in a bad way, like,
Yeah,
like people were going to mob him, or, you know,
sure.
it
Yeah,
kind of freaked him out in a bad way.
yeah,
But
I
yeah, I
can
mean,
imagine.
just seeing that, um, it was so exciting for me to, having listened to it on the record, and I remember being skeptical that anybody could be that good. Like I was
Yeah,
like, there's got to be some trick that they do in the studio, or nobody can
yeah,
sing that well and play that well. And then when
yeah.
I saw him in person, it's even better than the record. So,
Right, right.
it's like, I can't believe anybody can be this good.
Yeah,
So I remember
yeah,
just thinking, how can anybody be this good?
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Did you get to see Vassar play with them at any point, or just in general? Did you get to see any shows with Vassar?
I never did get to see Vassar play,
Yeah,
and I regret it because everybody, just always talked about what a great guy he was, and of course,
yeah.
playing, his playing's
Oh,
just
for sure.
unbelievable.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I know, I know how much Tony thought of him, and as his
yeah,
music. He's just
y-
favorite.
yeah. There was a recent video. I think it got posted in the group, or it showed up on YouTube one way or another. But there's a Vassar starts playing a solo. It was like some midnight jam somewhere, and there's the camera pans over to Tony, and his jaw literally drops. And he just stops playing and watches Vassar solo for a while because it was so out that, I mean, you could just see Tony was at total bliss listening to this. Oh, what a couple! I mean, they were just obviously really enjoyed each other's work.
Yeah.
So then how long after that did like I did Blue Highway and Tony cross paths after that? What was next after that great moment you first saw him there?
Well, that would have been in probably 82. And then
Mm-hmm.
I saw him at the Down Home here in Johnson City, Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that would have been 85. Is
Mm-hmm.
when he first got the unit together with Goodrow, and
Oh,
started
sure.
singing and coming back around here.
Yeah.
And I saw him at the Down Home, and just sat on the front row and just marveled, because his voice was in the prime, his playing was in
Right.
its prime,
Yep.
and I saw him every chance I could
Yeah.
all the way through You know, I remember seeing Allison play with him over here in Irwin, Tennessee at a festival in probably 88 or 89, somewhere around
Mm.
there.
Yep.
And then Blue Highway, we didn't get together till 94.
Yeah.
So, and Tim knew Tony pretty well from the Allison days because
Mm.
they played a lot of shows, you know, those Ricky Skaggs picking parties and stuff. They done a lot of that
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
So Tim knew Tony, and we'd see him at festivals, you know, and but Tony was always just like he had always known you. You know, there
Yeah.
wasn't he just came up and started talking just like he'd known you his whole life is the way Tony was.
Oh, that's incredible. That's
But
incredible.
I remember I bought an Accutron from Phil Ledbetter,
I was
and
about to ask about that. Yeah.
yeah, and I was backstage somewhere Tony was at, and I showed it to him, and he looked at it, you know, and he's like, if you ever need anybody to work on it, give me a call, you know, and we exchanged
Yeah.
phone numbers.
Yeah.
So one day I was in the parking lot at Home Depot, and my cell phone rang, and it was Tony, you know. And I answered, and he's just like, I was just calling to see how your watch is doing. And so we kind of struck up a friendship through Accutron watches pretty much.
Right. Right.
And he always had me looking for parts on eBay, but
Okay.
he would also say, don't ever just buy parts, buy a whole watch, you know, buy one that's not running, and I can get all
Yeah.
the parts out of it instead of buying individual parts. So
Yeah.
I would try to find two
Yeah.
Accutrons at a time. You know, maybe both of them weren't running, maybe one was running but needed work.
Yeah.
I'd buy one for him and buy one for me, send them
Yeah.
both to him. He would, he would redo one for me and fix it up and send it back to me and keep the other one.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how our friendship really got going. And he was just the kindest. I mean, people don't realize, you know, what a kind soul he was,
Yeah.
because I was teaching a lot of lessons back
Mm.
then, and you know, one of my students like, oh my God, please, you know, is there any way you could get Tony to fix an Accutron for me? And I asked him, he's like, yeah, send it to me, you know, and I mean, that's how kind he was, and
Yeah.
he would never charge anybody for working on it. He
Oh,
never
wow.
He would not charge, you know, he'd just be like,
Wow.
send me a junker, you know, or whatever, but he
Yeah.
would not take any
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
But I remember he would call periodically while he's working on whoever's watch, you know, and just take pains with it and be real
Yeah.
particular. And do they want me to do this? You want me to do that? You know,
Yeah.
just things that he didn't have to do. And just, you know, he's just the best.
Yeah. Absolutely. One of the comments I loved reading was, you mentioned of Steve Dilling hearing those early mixes, and Tim posted that he heard those early mixes of the Plays and Sings Bluegrass album, and said no one had ever heard any uh, soloing like that until that point. And I mean, it's still it's still largely untouched what happened on that record. I mean, that was,
Absolutely.
for me, that's the pinnacle of bluegrass right there. I mean,
Yeah.
that was
That's another one. I think Clay Jones gave me a cassette of those
Mhm.
mixes.
Yeah.
And the first thing on that cassette was Thunderclouds of Love, but it
Yeah.
cassette started like 3 seconds before his guitar break.
Oh,
So it
okay.
was, you know, that iconic guitar break on Thunderclouds of Love. That was the
Yeah.
first thing on that tape. It's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
where did this come from?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, for real. Yeah, that was, oh, yeah, what a great album. What a great album. Did he ever get a chance to sit in with you guys on a stage show, or
We used to do this thing called the Blue Highway Picking Party,
Mm,
And we did it one year at Virginia Intermont College up here, and
mm.
we'd always have one guest, and we
Yeah.
did it quite a few years. We had Ralph Stanley, and then
Okay.
one year we got Tony. I'm not sure what
Yeah.
year it was, but one year we got Tony, so he came and played, and he got up and played 3 or 4 with us, and did a little solo set by himself, and yeah,
Hmm.
that's really the only time that I ever got to play any music with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing is, I talked to him hours and hours on the phone,
Yeah.
and we never talked about music ever.
Yeah. I've
Let's
heard
just
people
not
say
talk
that.
about it.
Yeah.
The
Yep.
only the only thing I don't know how it came up, but I remember somehow electronic tuners came up one night, and you know how much he hated those. And and I remember him just being like, Flat and Scruggs played in tune, and they didn't need no fucking electronic tuner, or something.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, I just love how specific he was. And I noticed that that's like a reoccurring theme with the great musicians in any genre. They all had very specific characteristics to them. And a lot of them also seem to share a very specific thing about coffee. And I read that he had a very specific coffee routine. That seems to be kind of a standard with the great musicians. And I read even that like Beethoven had a very specific coffee routine in the morning. And I just love reading and also that he was really unwavering on once he found something he liked, he just stuck with it. I love that.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know if you're on Zane Fairchild's page on
Sure.
Facebook about Tony, but he
Yeah.
put something on a little while back about Tony's coffee making
Yeah.
ritual, and
Yeah.
you had to grind the beans and you had to turn it 14 times or 16 times or something, and Tony
Yeah.
was like, what if I want to just turn it 15 instead of 16? And then there was a long pause, and Tony was like, 16 times, Zane, 16 times. Not 15, 16.
Yeah. On the topic of him and music, right after the book came out, he did a signing at IBMA. And I mean, there was just a massive line, person after person, and I was towards the back of the line, and there was plenty of people. Oh, how'd you do that one lick? And I mean, you could see he was kind of losing patience with it all. And then finally, the person next to me asked, and Tony at that point just really wasn't even reacting. He just kind of was letting it ignore it. Then someone said, "Oh, how's your Mustang doing? Or are you working on it?" Oh man, he perked up like 100 times more, and he started talking. He's like, "Oh, let me tell you about it." And I mean, he must have
Yeah,
talked like he took 5 minutes out of that line just to tell about the Mustang.
yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
And I could call him or I could text him, and be like, "How you doing? Love you. Hope you're doing good.
Yeah.
Or happy birthday," or anything, and he would
Yeah.
never write back. But if I messaged him about a watch, he'd write back
Yeah.
immediately. You
Right,
know,
right.
I got a
Yeah,
watch that need you to work on. He's like, he'd write back, send it to me. Send it on.
yeah, yeah. Can you talk about about his philosophy? Because he kind of seemed to always have one foot in very traditional bluegrass, but also one foot in very progressive music, and especially like the comments he made at his IBMA speech, and just his own music going between like the bluegrass album band and his own unit instrumentals. I just wonder, like basically what can we take from that going forward with the future of bluegrass and the future of acoustic music. What you think he would offer, for music coming out these days and going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think he came from that school, that J.D. Crowe school of bluegrass
Yeah.
and Jimmy Martin, and I think that was ingrained deeply in his soul. and that's
Sure.
kind of the base of where everything came from. But then, when he moved to California to play with Grisman,
Yeah.
he learned all these different way to play chords. And if
Yeah.
instead of playing like a major 7 chord properly, like
Yeah.
jazz players do, he would never play that. He would play major 9 because he
Yeah.
said he would be playing bar chords.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that he was a musician that just kept his ears open and
Yeah.
didn't have a closed mind about anything that was good.
Right.
And he was a big fan of Oscar Peterson and Niles Henning
Yep.
and all those guys.
Yep.
And I think it's like I heard him say that if you keep your ears open, everything you hear will come out in your playing at some point. Like
Yeah.
if you're whether you're conscious of it or not, you're influenced by everything you hear.
Oh,
But,
sure. Yeah.
but I think, and then he also I heard him talking about. He said you take a banjo tune and Earl Scruggs and J.D. Crowe play the same tune on the same instrument, almost with the same notes, and they're
Yeah.
going to sound completely different.
Yep.
And he was like, "There's some things about music that you can't explain that are just
Yeah.
mysterious."
Yep.
And he's like, "That's a prime example. Even though they're playing an instrument that's set up, almost exactly the same tune, same sequence of notes, and they sound
Yeah.
nothing like each other." And he's like, you can't really talk about that because it's so mysterious that
Yeah.
there's nothing to say about it other than you can't really talk about it.
Yeah.
But
That
yeah,
made sense. Well, I
yeah,
say that made sense why he was on Rounder. Sorry, this got cut up. Um,
oh,
the author of the book said that the Rounders, they didn't have really they just, if they liked it, they liked it, and they would put it out. It didn't matter if it was had nothing to do with the album that came before. It's just
mhm,
whether they liked it. But also they said, the author said that they looked for people's personalities in it too, and the people involved, and even if it wasn't something they would normally work with, if the people involved were honest and genuine, and really coming from the right place musically,
right,
then they would work with it. And that seems like just a perfect home for Tony's ideas too.
mhm. Yeah, and I think Rounder. I mean, I know they put out a lot of records and financed a lot of records that they knew they were going to lose money on just because they thought this needs to be heard in the world. You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we're probably it's never going to recoup what we're going to spend on it, but we
Yeah.
feel like it needs to be heard by people, so we're going to do it anyway. And you
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
you got to respect that.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's what it's all about.
Right. Do you know if Tony enjoyed the role as a producer on other people's projects? I know in the 2000s he had a number of credits, including on Rounder, for projects he had produced. Was that a role that he enjoyed? Versus like being the front man, or a overdub, him calling all the shots on it.
Yeah, I mean, I know he did that Donna Hughes record,
Right.
and he had like Tim Stafford was there, and
Yeah.
a bunch of different guys were there, and and he didn't when he produced. I know that he didn't go about it like most people and write out charts, and
Yeah.
he wanted it to happen real organically, and just here's the tune. Like I know
Yeah.
he said on some of his records, they wouldn't even say he was going to take a break next. They'd just get in the studio and nod at, they'd nod at each other. That's
Yeah.
how much
Yeah.
that he liked it to be spontaneous instead of worked out.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
sure that he enjoyed that, or he probably wouldn't have done much of it if he hadn't enjoyed it.
Right. I read something along that lines about how he produced his own records, and it's such a fascinating comparison to today's uh sessions, where I mean you have to have everything charted out to the second. You have to have it sent to them, months in advance, and if not, then they probably won't come to the session. And I thought, yeah, how about we just tell them what he did, which was show up and then we'll play. I mean, it's just such a world of difference now. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, like the cut of Old Train.
yeah.
Uh, Evidently they didn't have an arrangement, and he's like, I think I can kick it off. So he's like, this for the kickoff, and evidently they just cut it twice, and he liked
Mm,
the other take better than the one that they used, but everybody's
mm,
overall performance was better on the one that they used. But I mean, that
gotcha.
shows you how spontaneous it was. It's like, I think
Yeah.
I can kick it off, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. That's incredible.